History remembers her as an ultimate seductress, a woman who used her beauty to bring the most powerful men of the ancient world to their knees. But history was written by her enemies. Imagine a woman who spoke 9 languages, studied mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy, and successfully ruled an empire during its darkest hour. She did not just seduce men, she seduced empires. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, and her name was Cleopatra. For 2,000 years, Rome's propaganda machine has hidden the true genius of the woman who nearly united the Western world under her crown. Today, we unmask the real Cleopatra, a master political strategist whose life was a high-stakes chess game where a single wrong move meant the absolute annihilation of her kingdom. Egypt, in the 1st century before Christ, was a land of ancient wonders but rapidly fading power. The Ptolemaic dynasty, Macedonian Greeks who had ruled Egypt since the death of Alexander the Great, was crumbling from within. Corruption, brutal family infighting, and financial weakness had turned Egypt into a client state of the expanding Roman Republic. Cleopatra was born into this world of shadows, daggers, and shifting alliances. Poisoning siblings and betraying parents was a dark family tradition for the Ptolemies. When her father died, she was left to co-rule with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. But in the Ptolemaic court, power was never shared. It was stolen. Her brother's ambitious advisors launched a swift coup, forcing the brilliant young queen into exile in the harsh deserts of Syria. But Cleopatra was not a victim. She was a pharaoh. In exile, she did not weep. She raised a mercenary army, determined to march back and reclaim her birthright. As Egypt stood on the very brink of a bloody civil war, the ultimate master of Rome, Julius Caesar, arrived in Alexandria. He came to collect debts owed by Egypt and to restore order, but he found an empty palace and a petulant young boy king. Cleopatra knew this was her defining moment. If she could reach Caesar before her brother did, she could change the fate of the world. However, returning to Alexandria meant passing through her brother's naval blockade and sneaking into a palace crawling with enemies where certain death awaited her. This is where one of the greatest legends in human history was born. In the dead of night, Cleopatra slipped into the harbor on a small, unassuming fishing boat. Wrapped tightly inside a large hemp sack, or as legend says, a luxurious, heavy carpet, she was carried through the palace gates on the shoulders of a loyal servant. Smuggled directly into Caesar's private chambers, the sack was untied. Out stepped the young queen, disheveled but radiating absolute confidence and royal majesty. Caesar, a man who had conquered Gaul and faced down the entire Roman Senate, was utterly captivated. It was not merely her youth that charmed him, but her unbelievable audacity, her quick wit, and her razor-sharp political mind. She spoke to him in his own language, proposing an alliance that would benefit them both. With Caesar's military might behind her, Cleopatra crushed her brother's forces. Ptolemy XIII drowned in the waters of the Nile, weighed down by his golden armor, and Cleopatra claimed the throne of Egypt. But she needed more than just a crown. She needed an heir to secure her bloodline and protect her nation from Roman annexation. She bore Caesar a son, named Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. This was a direct defiance of Roman tradition. When Cleopatra traveled to Rome as a visiting monarch, she did not hide away. She lived openly in Caesar's private villa just across the Tiber River, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, completely outraging the conservative Roman elite. They saw her as a foreign witch, an oriental despot who was corrupting their greatest general and threatening the democratic ideals of the Republic. The tension reached a boiling point on the fateful Ides of March, 44 before Christ. Daggers flashed in the Senate, and Julius Caesar lay dead in a pool of blood. Cleopatra's protector was gone in an instant, and she found herself trapped in a deeply hostile city. She fled back to Egypt under the cover of darkness, knowing that a massive storm was just beginning to brew across the Mediterranean. Rome erupted into a brutal, chaotic civil war to avenge Caesar's murder. Out of the ashes of the old republic emerged two dominant men: Caesar's adopted son, the cold, calculating young Octavian, and Caesar's most loyal and fierce general, the passionate, hard-drinking warrior, Mark Antony. Antony took control of the wealthy eastern provinces, and he desperately needed Egyptian gold and supplies to fund his upcoming military campaigns against the Parthian Empire. He summoned Cleopatra to the city of Tarsus, demanding she answer for her actions during the war. Cleopatra knew that this meeting would decide the survival of her kingdom. She did not arrive as a supplicant begging for mercy. She arrived as a living goddess. She sailed up the Cydnus River in a magnificent golden barge, with purple sails that caught the wind and silver oars that beat time to the hypnotic music of flutes and harps. She lay beneath a canopy of gold cloth, dressed as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, while beautiful youths fanned her. The air was thick with the scent of costly perfumes. Mark Antony, a rough soldier who loved luxury and theatricality, was completely overwhelmed. He fell madly in love with her, abandoning his responsibilities in Rome to spend years in Alexandria, living a life of legendary excess alongside the Egyptian queen. Their union was far more than a passionate romance. It was a superpower alliance that threatened to reshape the map of the world. Together, they openly challenged the supremacy of Rome. Cleopatra gave Antony the financial backing and resources his legions needed, and in return, Antony granted Egypt vast territories, restoring the ancient imperial borders of her ancestors. They held a grand ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria, where they declared Caesarion to be the true and legitimate heir of Julius Caesar. This single move directly threatened Octavian's legitimacy to rule Rome. In the West, Octavian seized his opportunity. He launched a massive, relentless propaganda war, painting Antony as a man completely enslaved by a foreign queen, a general who had traded his Roman manhood for the charms of an Egyptian sorceress. Octavian masterfully convinced the Roman people that Cleopatra was plotting to conquer Rome itself. He did not declare war on Antony. He declared war solely on Cleopatra, making it look like a defense of Western civilization against Eastern decadence. The conflict culminated in the year 31 before Christ, at the epic naval battle of Actium off the coast of Greece. The fate of the entire ancient world hung in the balance. Hundreds of massive warships clashed in a chaotic, bloody struggle. During the height of the battle, sensing that the tide was turning against them and fearing entrapment, Cleopatra ordered her 60 Egyptian ships to break through the lines and retreat. In an act of pure desperation and heartbreak, Antony abandoned his fighting men and followed her flagship into the sunset. The dream of an Anglo-Egyptian empire was shattered in a single afternoon. They retreated to Alexandria, knowing the end was near. As Octavian's victorious legions closed in on the capital by land and sea, the illusion of power completely vanished. Antony, receiving a false, tragic report that Cleopatra had already committed suicide, fell upon his own sword. He did not die instantly. He was carried, bleeding and dying, to the fortified mausoleum where Cleopatra was hiding, and he passed away in her arms. Now, Cleopatra was completely alone, facing her worst nightmare. Octavian arrived in Alexandria as a conqueror. He intended to capture the famous queen alive so he could parade her through the crowded streets of Rome in heavy chains, presenting her as a trophy of his absolute triumph. But Cleopatra refused to be a Roman slave. She chose her own dramatic ending, keeping control of her fate until her very last breath. The exact details of her final moments remain shrouded in deep mystery. Some historical accounts say she allowed a venomous cobra hidden inside a basket of ripe figs to bite her arm. Others believe she consumed a deadly, fast-acting concoction of poisons she kept hidden in a hollow comb. When Octavian's guards burst into the tomb, they found her already dead. She lay majestically on a golden couch, dressed in her finest royal robes, wearing her crown, looking every bit the divine Pharaoh she claimed to be. With her death, the 3,000-year-old line of the Egyptian pharaohs came to a permanent end. Egypt was reduced to a mere province of the Roman Empire, and Octavian returned to Rome to become Augustus, the very first Roman emperor. Cleopatra may have lost the war, but she won immortality. She remains an eternal symbol of defiance, intelligence, and charisma, the brilliant queen who dared to challenge the greatest empire the world had ever seen, and whose name still echoes powerfully through the corridors of time. If this journey into the past has captivated you, don't forget to leave a like. It's the best way to support this project and keep history alive. To continue unraveling the mysteries of the most fascinating figures who ever walked this earth, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss our next trip through time. Until next time.